So continuing with our last topic of violence, I want to pick up kind of where we left off, which was a vast simplification of a vast simplification. And the takeaway there was that mainly it is fear that drives us allowing violence enacted on our behalf. And the promise on the back end is things like safety, peace, stability. What we don't realize is how often that wide mandate ends up becoming a carte blanche approval for even worse things along the way. We know that this particular thing brings us stability and safety. Why don't we just keep adding on different versions of it in different places? And what happens is we end up with this system where we give carte blanche approval for different forms of violence to be eked into our lives just because of things like safety and stability. Starting at the youngest level, we have kids that in any society, they're going to be a little bit violent, they're going to be a little bit rowdy, out of control, non-attentive, they might miss school, they might not feel enthused to go to school, they might have trouble going out at home. What we end up with is things like in-school suspensions and detentions. We end up with kids being put in handcuffs and taken to jails. We get the kids being tackled by police officers in their schools. We get kids being taken to juvenile centers and incarcerated, or even just boys' schools and girls' schools that are for troubled children. We end up with these situations where kids are being exposed to incarceration as a result of doing things that pretty much any kid would do given the opportunity. There are kids that end up doing heinous things like bullying and violence and shootings and stabbings and murder and beatings and like all these other things that happen as a result of the environment that they were steeped in. But part of understanding society is understanding that just because those things happen doesn't mean that that person needs to be subtracted from society. And that's just the kid side of things. When we move to the adult side of things, it's even more complicated, right? There are authority figures in order to keep the peace who are allowed to do things like start car chases, start gun shootouts, tackle and arrest people in these violent physical ways, choke people out, use chemical agents, shock, tase, beat, assault people, all in the name of keeping the peace. And if that's the only tools that we have at our disposal, we cannot be surprised when those tools get used in ways that are not in alignment with having a good and peaceful society. And then we talk about like the actual punishment side of things. The only punishment we have in this country is incarceration or death. And a similar thing happens at the highest level when we talk about governance. We've given the government ability to do violence in our names that should not be available to any person or entity without certain levels of checks and balances. They can surveil us, they can track us, they can displace entire persons, they can prevent persons from leaving the place that they're in. They can take persons away from society and torture them without any kind of oversight or backlash. Or they can do any number of those things by sending an armed force off of our shores onto another shores to enact that kind of violence on other persons in our name, in the name of keeping us safe. And I'm going to get into a little bit some of the repercussions of that later, but what I want you to think about right now is, what if that isn't the only way? Just hypothetically, let's say that there was something that happened tomorrow and we ended up with a perfect non-violent solution for every single problem that we can think of. Would you still want to do the violent one? And if so, why do you think it's so important to hold on to those elements of violence within a peaceful society? And at the end of the day, the real violent solution is the friends you make along the way.